TE831 and welcome to week 3 of teaching school subject matter with technology. This week we sort of shift gears a little bit as we move into module 2 of the course and we begin to understand what it means to take an inquiry stance approach to teaching with technology. So as always, here's a quick agenda. We'll sort of preview some of the weekly readings and viewings, and then I'll sort of talk from my own stance and disposition of understanding technology as a form of literacies, as we begin to think about how our own school subject matter becomes mediated by techno-teaching. I'll also briefly highlight Rick Beach and his colleagues' book and basically, provide an overview of why I decided to use it for this course. It is coming from the perspective of activity theory, so it's an activity-based approach to understanding what it means to teach with technology. Hopefully, in the diagram that I provide with you in this opening video, you'll see how it can really help you think about your problem of practice. I'll preview the week as we make this move into Module 2, which is teaching and practicing techno-inclusive instruction, as well as think a little bit about check-ins as needed. Really, I want to make sure that you are getting what you want out of the course and that you are able to flex your muscles at whatever level or competency you feel successful in doing that with technology. But I do want to be here for you if you do sort of want additional work and or just sort of more understandings and nuance to the readings that we do each week. So last week we sort of thought a lot about this question of digital natives or digitally naive. Many of us are sort of categorized in that sense of, according to Prensky, we ourselves are digital natives. Others of us say, I'm not really probably a digital native. Even though I'm sort of born under this auspice of digital native, I would consider myself digitally naive. Or, as James put it in his vlog, right, you have like this sort of old soul when it comes to technology. This week, we are going to sort of think about this as we think about digital natives as the students in our classrooms. Not necessarily who we are as people or teachers, but the students in our classroom, and we begin to investigate their own histories of participation and access to technology as we begin to rethink our own practice. So we're going to read a lot this week about what it means to take an inquiry as stance approach to teaching with technology. For some of you, this week is usually the week where you're like, oh, I've actually read some of these things before in other MATC classes where I view myself as a teacher and teacher educator, or I understand the role of teacher education and professional development. For others of us, this may be new, and so taking a teacher inquiry stance may be one of the first forays into understanding our own practice as research in working to get better for our students and for our own sort of instructional aims and goals. So now that we sort of are thinking about our students' histories of participation and access with technology, I want you to consider the following questions as you think about your problem of practice. I briefly, in the vodcast autobiography assignment, asked you to begin to think about this, but I want you to now sort of think about it as we sort of begin our first, general entry into Rick Beach's book, Understanding and Creating Digital Text. So I want you to begin to think about, what is your unit of analysis? Is it a project that you have your students do at the, at the end of a unit or a lesson? Is it a unit? Is it a lesson? Is it a standard or a learning goal that spirals throughout the year? Is it a form of assessment, right? Is it a lab, for example? Or is it a center in a pre-K classroom? I want you then to sort of narrow it down and think about, well, what particular discipline or subject matter does my problem of practice stem from? So when I look at Ashley's opening vodcast autobiography, I see that she sort of narrows her focus into going into science, right? But more particular, she even sort of goes the next step and says, here's a standard that falls under the auspices of 7th grade science of what I want to investigate and remix and remediating. I also then want you to think about, this is a good spot for you to sort of really problem solve and collaborate with your PLC. Like I said last week, I'm real hands off. For some of you, this is an added thing that in your busy schedules and lives, you just don't want to do. For others, I've seen that the PLCs is a part of this course that really has transformed the learning across semesters. So begin to problem solve and think with your PLC members about your problem of practice, as they do very generally share sort of the content area or grade of your learners. So, why Beach's book? This is not a text that I'm like, oh, I want you to spend your money and get this book. But it really comes from an understanding of thinking about remixing and remediating instruction with technology through an activity based model. So, here you see that in general, you sort of have a subject, an object, and a community at the center of that smaller triangle. And this really helps us think about activity as a subject that we teach, an object or a product that we sort of teach, want, and come from, which is that outcome. An object can also be sort of a tool that we use to get to that outcome. For us, that object will be technology. And the community is really thinking about the learners, our classroom, our discipline. On the outside of that smaller triangle, you see a larger one: the rules, the tools, and the division of labor. The tool, in this sense, shifts the object up to be sort of the digital technology, whereas the object may become a standard, a goal, or a unit. The division of labor is thinking about our own histories of participation. As a teacher, you don't want to do all of the work, so how can you have your students really help you and engage in that dialogic instruction by remixing and remediating with technology? The rules are sort of standard. As a teacher, oftentimes we always set the rules or the parameters of the instructional activity, of a lab, of centers, of a mathematics sort of unit. For us in this course, the rules, the tools, and the division of labor become really important because these are some of the ways in which we want to remix or remediate the subject, community, and the object, ultimately leading towards a different outcome. Now, some of you may be shaking your head and or sort of scratching your head and saying, what? I just don't get it. This will become very clear as we, in the next couple of weeks, really begin to do a deep dive into Beach's book, as well as select case studies for the particular content that you teach. So if you preview the syllabus and look ahead, you'll actually see that in some of the upcoming weeks, there's a little bit of a choose your own adventure where you will sort of choose under the, a folder on D2L what readings you will read, and it's based on your content area. And I have everything from ECE, early childhood, to STEM and STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So this week we're sort of taking a teacher research inquiry lens, and I want us to sort of think about the cycle of teacher inquiry. In the first sort of goal of teacher inquiry, we identify a problem of meaning, right? So this is actually the first step that we're taking. We did it a little bit last week with the vodcast, but we're doing it this week, head on, in identifying a problem of practice. In the next couple of weeks, we'll begin to develop questions and examine assumptions. In the third sort of overarching goal of the cycle, you are sort of interested in gathering data. This is where we sort of stop in summer session. In the fall and spring semesters, when teachers are teaching with students, I typically like to go through the full cycle. It really is exciting to see teachers examine sort of assessments or units that have gone through this process and have been remixed or remediated, because you will sort of see the aha or wow moments in your instruction. Unfortunately, because this is a summer, we're actually going to do a lot of the prep work in this semester, and hopefully this is something that you'll be able to use next year when you teach either that unit, assessment, project, etc. The fourth, fifth, and sixth steps, though, are really important, and this is where you get bang for your buck in teacher inquiry. You're going to then analyze data, you'll interpret it, and then you're going to take action and reorient your problem. Did anything change? This is really a hypothesis for instruction. Did my students learn more? Did they learn differently? Did they sort of fall flat on their face? Did I fall flat in my face? All of these things are really important as we begin to take a teacher research inquiry lens to our own practice. And it puts you in sort of charge of your own professional development. And this is sort of a really great sort of paradigm to fall into, as many of us want to do and change instruction over the course of the years as our classrooms become infiltrated with one-to-one initiatives or BYOD initiatives, which you've talked about in this week's discussion posts. So I'm going to give you a sample problem of practice that I actually had from a university course. And rather than sort of situate this in a K-12 learning space, because Paris teaches at a university, I sort of want to sort of situate this in a university-based classroom. So my problem of practice would be, how do I use technology to texture and deepen students' engagement with textual analysis? So my problem isn't engagement, but it's actually in textual analysis. Because when I was doing this sort of essay, I saw that my students were sort of skimming the surface of textual analysis or deep reading. So I wanted to say, what happens if we shift or remix the mode? If we remediate the assignment's goal and remix through a mode, going from sort of alphabetic print and print-based text to video and audio, how can composing with video rather than the traditional print-based essay illuminate students' understanding of course themes and topics? Now, with this, you sort of see two artifacts. On the left hand, bottom left, you sort of see a questioning the text paper rubric. So this is the rubric that I would traditionally give students in my children's literature course. And it sort of presented itself across three domains, thinking about consistency with the assignment, the effectiveness of the question or argument, and the clarity of communication. As you can sort of see, as I remixed this rubric and thought about what I wanted out of video, the rubric changed, right? So I looked for effectively use of the using video as a mode, the quality of the argument or the question, the genre expectations of this video essay. So I literally changed the form from this print-based essay to a video-based document. It really was sort of a documentary of some ways. And with that, I changed what the outcome or product looked like. Now, you will have to include examples just like this one to show me how you're remixing and remediating. Okay? So as you think about this sort of case study, if you will, about the project, I want you to think about these three questions. If you're repurposing and or remixing a unit plan, you will need to include a before and after version with the techno-inclusive changes highlighted. Now, you're obviously not going to say, okay, my unit is, let's say 30 instructional days. You're not going to remix every day with technology. That would actually be silly. And I don't think that that gets at the core of how learning outcomes for students will change. But you may remix 12 of the 30 instructional days through some use. Or maybe you say, at the end of the unit, they did this, and it was a print-based essay. Now I want them to do this, and it's only through sort of a podcast, right? How does that sort of shift and change the purpose of your instruction? If you're remixing a current project, please include a version from either previous students or sections. I'd love to sort of see this paper-based piece of writing in addition to the new technological-based project you create. In the third step, I want you to identify whether the site, tool, or platform, here I'm talking about technology, is remixing or remediating the learning. Again, this may be one of those moments where you're like, well, what do you mean, Wargo? So let's get some basic definitions down. Remix is the learning, combining, or editing of existing materials to produce a new product. When I think about remix, I honestly think a lot about sort of taking a bunch of YouTube videos and making an essay based on sort of gender stereotypes in 21st century commercials. So I would pool all of these commercials I find on YouTube and I'd remix them and sort of collapse them into a document. I'd maybe put some video and over video, some music. I may do a VH1 pop-up video thing that shows sort of how I'm seeing these archetypes and stereotypes play out. But ultimately, I'm taking what's already out there and reforming it. Remediating, right, is a little bit similar, but a little bit different. Remediating is the process of taking a text, whether maybe it's a newspaper article, a story, a film, or even something like a business proposal or report, and translating it into a new medium. In my previous example, you saw me remediating the essay. And at the core of both of these sort of concepts, remixing and remediating, is the understanding that how we perceive information changes the way in which that information is presented. And technology is but one of the tools to make that happen. So, I also, want to sort of say that you've already done some of this work through your vodcast autobiographies, rather than a generic discussion post saying, hey, my name's John. I am your instructor for this course. I could have done a video, but you did a video. You did sort of welcome us into your world quite literally by showing, by telling, by letting us listen into who you are. So like you'll see on our wiki site, take some time this week to really get to know one another. Check out your PLC members, who they are, what they teach, what they do. And from the videos that I've previewed already, this is such great work. And I'm really excited to learn alongside of you for the rest of this semester. As always, if you have any questions and or if this video doesn't make sense, this is one of those where you may want to watch it 2 or 3 times. Email me, tweet me, and really just be in conversation with each other. Have a wonderful week, and I look forward to sort of seeing